Hey there! It's been a long time, hasn't it? Lots happened since then. I got a new job, I moved, and yeah, I have been reading. I've been drinking whiskey. Have not done the combination for a while, but I just finished this book right here, Ducks Newburyport, and I need to talk about it. And so this is the next edition. I don't know what it is of Alan Drinks Whiskey and Talks About Books, in which I'm going to talk about Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellman. And I just loved this book. It is not going to be a book that is for everyone. It is 1,000 pages long, and it consists mostly of one sentence. I saw a TikTok about it that was basically like, if that doesn't scare you away, if you're intrigued by this, you'll probably like it. But if you're like, that sounds really dumb or weird, just don't read it. I really like this book, though. It intrigued me. That did not scare me away. As soon as I learned that this book existed, I was like, I need to read that. And it was one of the first things that I checked out when I finally got on summer break. So it is a 1,000 page book. Again, it consists mostly of a single sentence. That sentence is broken up by a side story that details a mountain lion. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And that one sentence is the inner monologue of a Midwestern housewife. And anyone that has any level of anxiety is going to recognize themselves in this book. I don't have a lot of anxiety, but I know people that do, and I hear echoes of them in the book. Um, just those parts of self doubt. The narrator doubts frequently throughout the book if her husband Leo loves her, despite all evidence that he does. I kept waiting for like some little bit of evidence to be sprinkled in that Leo was unfaithful or that Leo didn't love her, and it just never came. And maybe you have picked up on, if you've read the book, maybe you picked up on something completely different. By all means, let me know. Our narrator worries about her children, worries about she's going to be safe. She worries about America too. And I just think that anybody that has any level of anxiety, whether that's something that you deal with at a high level on a day-to-day basis, or if you're more like me and it creeps in every now and again, but it's not anything that you think is, too bad, and there's no judgment there. We're all on different ends of, we all get it, right? um, you'll recognize bits of either yourself or people that you know and love that deal with anxiety. It's all in there. This book deals a lot with like kind of the internal versus the external. Even though it's an inner monologue, those external forces are coming in, they're influencing that. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what makes this book really interesting. It's just kind of that juxtaposition and how external forces do impact the internal. Our narrator, and I never did pick up on a name. If anyone's got a name, just drop it in the comments or whatever. I'd love to know, because it is probably one of those things that in a book like this, her name was listed like once on page 703, and I just glossed over it because the book does get repetitive. A lot of it is the fact that, and it's easy to sort of maybe lose some details like that. But she's got this voice in her head that just tells her that she's not worthy of love. Like I said, that her children hate her, that Leo doesn't really love her, things like that. She's very worried that her pie making business is doomed. She makes pies out of her home, and she's very worried that that's going to go under. And she needs that pie business. The family needs that pie business to succeed, and that her children hate her. This doesn't seem to be the case, but she worries about them. And anyone that's a parent, and I have two children, uh, you probably recognize that fear. Not necessarily in my stage that they hate me because they're young, but you worry about them. You worry about your kids, and there's this kind of internal monologue going on about, am I doing what's right for them? Am I doing what's best for them? Um, and I think anytime we have those thoughts, we tend to judge ourselves too, and we judge ourselves very harshly. And that's what's going on in this book. And it kind of makes maybe a case there that maybe we shouldn't be so harsh on ourselves, because things do sort of work out in Duck's Newburyport. There is some teenage rebelliousness, but aside from that, and the worries that causes, everything seems relatively good, at least from the family loves her standpoint. There's some other things going on that she worries about a lot. Like I said, she needs the pie business to succeed because she had cancer a while ago. And while she's healthy now, they're still trying to pay off that medical debt. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Um, she also worries that she wasn't a good enough daughter. Her mom had passed away some years past, and sometimes she kind of fixates on moments that she had as a child and just the things that she wishes she could have done differently, or things that she wished she would have said near the end, or things like that. And I think anybody that's lost someone that they care about can sometimes ruminate on those things as well. Um, but while that's all kind of going on internally, there's external things outside the home. Um, One of the biggest ones is guns. Guns are all over this book. She's just worried about guns. She was worried about climate change. She's worried about the Trump presidency. I would say that the narrator of this book skews left. I'm not going to go out and say that she's like far left or anything like that, but she's, I would say, votes reliably Democratic, and she's living in an increasingly conservative Ohio, and it seems to be a more rural place in Ohio, and so she's worried about the Trump presidency and all these people around her that voted for him that she doesn't can't really kind of figure out why. She's worried about the weird guy who delivers the chicken feed, and why does he always seem to want to come into the house? That becomes really big later on. I won't spoil it. And then there's a mountain lion that's roaming around Ohio, and that it causes school closures, and she's always worried about that as well because there's a mountain lion out there. She's got chickens and things like that, and yeah, and the mountain lion is the same one that is the other story of the book. So there's all these kind of things that go on, and it's this narrative. It's almost tempting to say that it's a rambling narrative. It is stream of consciousness. It is just it just goes, but there is an order to it, and I think once you like sit with it for a while, you kind of figure out the structure of it. So it's not quite rambling. It's really good, actually. I mean, it's a really good book. That's why I am taking the time to do this. So I know that I talk about sustainability a lot, or I have. I guess I should probably refer to the old shows in the past tense because it's been over a year, I think, since I made one of these. Uh, I don't have the whiteboard anymore, right? Um, but a theme, if you go back and watch the old episodes, is sustainability, and I talk a lot about climate fiction. And I don't think this book is quite climate fiction, just because there's so much else going on in it, and I don't think climate is kind of the driving force of it. But this book does ask questions about kind of the sustainability of American culture. Like, how long can we keep this up? How long can we keep the American experiment up? For instance, how sustainable is it to have a healthcare system that can leave people bankrupt, that can leave people destitute? Oftentimes, our narrator thinks, wait, where would we be without Leo and his health insurance? They'd probably be homeless. They'd be down on their luck because she couldn't, when she was sick, she couldn't really work. She didn't want to go back into, she was like a professor, I believe, and she didn't want to go back into doing that. And but how sustainable is that? And you hear stories all the time about people that lose everything because they got cancer. They lose, their homes, or they're in mounds of medical debt because something happened to them that was kind of out of their control. How sustainable is a culture that continues to ignore the signs of climate change, which are becoming more and more apparent every year? I recently drove from Montana out to Washington, where I now live, and the smoke from Canadian fires was just pervasive for a good portion of that drive, and just the smoke in the air, and then the rising temperatures globally and things like that. And how can you just ignore that continually as a culture, but we seem to be doing that. Our narrator gets caught in a flash flood, and I think that also that secondary story of the lioness who is searching for her cubs, and she makes kind of a spiral through like Ohio, Pennsylvania, I think West Virginia as well. Um, it kind of touches on how we keep encroaching on these natural species and what happens when we keep doing that, and how sustainable is that, not only for nature but also for us. um, those are things that this book kind of highlights. And then I think one of the big things around sustainability that the book highlights is the sustainability of gun culture and gun violence. Our narrator worries constantly about gun violence when her kids are at school, when they are out shopping. It's everywhere. She'll comment on the news. I heard about this shooting in such and such a place, and the police shot this kid, and this person was shot by their husband, and this person was shot by like their kid, and it's everywhere in the book. And it's easy to pass it off as paranoia. Again, it's a stream of consciousness, 1,000 page sentence. It's really easy to dismiss it rambling or crazy or whatever. But is it? Because those are actual things that have happened. I'm pretty sure that Lucy Ellman is like referencing real life events. And if she's not, she very easily could be. It keeps happening. There's more and more gun violence. Mass shootings continue to go at an enormous clip in this country. And how sustainable is it that we let that continue to happen and we do nothing about it? So I think that's just kind of one of the themes of sustainability. A quote, and 1,000 pages, I pulled one quote from this book, but I thought it was the quote that kind of really summed up the book. And it's near the end of it. It's page like 965 or something like that. I didn't, on my notes here, I didn't write the page number. But she says, the fact that we all go on pretending things are fine, hoping everything's A-okay, even though everything is nowhere near okay, and we all know it. Dot, dot, dot. Because in the middle of 1,000 page sentence, right? How sustainable is America? How sustainable is it to say, yep, things are good? We have to keep up the status quo. We have to keep our healthcare system just the way it is. Student loan relief? No, we don't want to rock the boat too much. You want to unionize? No, 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 no. We don't want to rock the boat too much. How sustainable is that? The book doesn't really give any indication as to what will happen if it becomes untenable, but we're getting there. It's not the environment either. When we talk about sustainability, we oftentimes talk about the environment, but it's not just the environment in this book. It's just the culture at large and different aspects of that culture. And there are others that we could talk about too, but you know, I don't want to go on for 1,000 pages. I've only got the one glass of whiskey here, right? There were two tidbits that I want to talk about before I get out of Dodge here. One, things that I thought were really interesting about this book that just aren't necessarily related to the text itself. One is that the book is written by a British author. Lucy Ellman is British. This isn't an American commenting on America very well versed in America, where he like knows the culture very well. There wasn't anything that I'm like, Americans aren't like that. It's a Brit, it's a European commenting on America, which I thought was really interesting. Because then I started to wonder, how do people in Britain and other places view this work? Do they have a laugh about it? Like, oh, those Americans and their healthcare system that leaves people destitute and just the rampant amount of gun violence that they deal with? Or do they see a reflection of the extremism that is starting to creep into their own countries, or like in British cases and English cases is there, right? Because right wing extremism is not just a uniquely American thing. We see these right wing parties gain a lot more prevalence in European parliaments, if not taking outright control. The world is sort of in chaos, and for whatever reason, this is the stabilizing force that people are rallying behind, even though there are people on the left that are kind of ringing the alarm bells about what's going to happen if we continue to do this. And so I'm just wondering, did the people not in America and did Lucy Ellman write this book as sort of like those Americans, or is it sort of like a warning about the path that maybe Europe is heading down and other countries are heading down? That if you give in to this extremism, if you give in to, um, I don't know that fascism is really what's coming ahead when this book is written. We'll talk about that here next. But like, is this the path that we want to be going down? Do we see slivers of what's happening in Europe, Cass? And this is where we're ultimately going to end up if we don't course correct in some ways. And then the other thing that I thought about as I was like reading this book was that the book was written in 2017 and it comes out in 2019. And even though that was like what 3 years ago, it's basically long, long ago in the before time. This housewife had all of this to worry about: gun violence, climate change, the Trump presidency, right wing extremism, the creepy guy that's delivering chicken feet, had all of that to worry about before COVID. I can only imagine how long this book would be if we were recording her thoughts when quarantines were in place or when January 6th happened. Oh my goodness. It would be like 5 times this length. Because if systems were under stress then, and they were, that only accelerated in 2020 and since then. Like, that's only just like a sequel to this book would be like 3 times as long because she'd be ruminating on what happened during COVID and since then and things like that. And probably as someone who, just got over a cancer scare, or not a scare, but had cancer, like she's probably more concerned about that than the average rural Ohioan was. So, and I mean, for those of us that went through, and it's all of us that went through it, um, we had pretty intense inner monologues at that time. What is going on? The world just changed so rapidly. And I think this book shows just how much has changed in just a few years, you know, from 2019 to now. And it serves as a reminder, not that we necessarily need it because we are currently living in them, but we live in unprecedented times. I did see a thing that's like, I would love to live in precedented times. I'm done with unprecedented times. But this book kind of serves as a reminder of just how unprecedented things are. And that's an unintended consequence. Lucy Ellman didn't know that we were going to have COVID. She didn't know that there were going to be lockdowns. She didn't know how the 2020 presidential race was going to shake out. When she's writing this book, Trump is in his second year in office. I don't even think the ramp up for the Democratic primary has begun yet. We don't know that it's going to be Biden versus Trump. We don't know about COVID. We don't know about anything like that. Uh, and yet, this book serves as a reminder of just how quickly things have changed. So, anyway, I really liked this book. I really liked Duck's Newburyport. It was really interesting. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't be like, I don't understand how this could be 1,000 pages long. There's the duck, and it's a single sentence because it just is. Um, it is difficult to read. There aren't really chapters. There's not, some of those normal guides that would be there aren't there. But if that's something that you can, feel like you can get past and you can kind of keep a track of the narrative, and it can be tricky, but if you're not instantly put off by a 1,000 page book that is one sentence long, then I think this book might be for you. And I highly recommend it. At least go check it out from your local library and give it a whirl. And speaking of the local library, I got to go return this. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Again, this is the YouTube show that probably be better as a podcast. Cheers.